Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
When you buy Kroger brand products, you feel like you're winning. That's because they offer proven quality at lower than low prices. In fact, we guarantee that you and your family will love how Kroger brand products taste, or you get your money back. So next time you're shopping for the family, look for delicious Kroger brand products, because they'll make you all feel like you're winning. Shop now, in-store, or online. Bakers, fresh for everyone.
It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
On Giants.com.
I like it, I like it.
And the Giants mobile app.
Boom, give me some juice.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's roll.
Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast, our special schedule release edition. I am John Schmo, joined by Paul Dottino. The Giants Huddle Podcast is, of course, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. The Giants' 2024 schedule is released, Paul. And it's a fun one. We obviously knew all the opponents, so now it's just a matter of how these get ordered. Yep. And I feel like I am contractually required to start this by saying this is going to be a fun conversation. It's good to talk about how the placement of the opponents will determine how the flow of the season will go. But don't put too much stock into this, because we don't know what players on what teams are even going to be on the field and healthy when the Giants play these opponents, when they do them, based on the schedule.
Yeah, I think what I always do, and I always put it up on Twitter, I do an analysis based on the logistics and the presumed competitiveness of the teams that the Giants are going to play and where they have been slotted. And you know, it's a fun exercise to do. I think in most of the last 10 years or so, when I've done it, I've come up with many more reasons to frown than to necessarily be smiling. But I think in this particular instance, there's probably a few more smiles.
Yeah, so let's go through it here, Paul. Let's do 20,000-foot view stuff first here.
Okay.
I counted, and I'm going through it again just to make sure I have it right. I counted 9 1 o'clock games, 6 at home, 3 on the road, 1 Sunday at 4:25 game.
Right.
We have 3 primetime games. Thursday night against Dallas on September 26th, Monday night against Pittsburgh on October 28th, and then you have Sunday night against Cincinnati on October 13th. Those are the 3 primetime games. Now, there are 2 other standalone games. Get your turkey legs ready, folks, at Dallas on Thanksgiving. That'll be the 4:30 game on Thanksgiving. And then also the Giants, as was previously announced, will be in Munich to take on the Panthers on November 10th. That's the game immediately prior to the bye week, and that'll be a 9:30 a.m. standalone game on Sunday morning, November 10th. And then we have 2 to-be-determined games at the end of the year. The Indianapolis Colts, it'll either be Saturday, December 28th, or Sunday, December 29th at MetLife Stadium, and then they'll close the year against the Eagles the following week, and that could be a Saturday or Sunday game, depending on how that week's go. So that's how the days and times are kind of spread out over the course of the schedule.
The first thing that surprised me, John, when I saw it, and let's just go right to the big headline item, Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles with a game against the Giants. Knowing how Mike North, who is the head of the division that does all the schedules, knowing how he values storylines and values big-name superstar players, it seemed to me we would probably see Saquon Barkley come back with Philly and play the Giants here at MetLife Stadium in an early season game, probably a primetime game. That's not the way that this shapes up.
Yeah, and if it wasn't a primetime game, you figured Fox would have bid heavy on it for a 4:25 start game. But it's a 1 o'clock game on a Sunday afternoon on October 20th.
Yeah.
I agree. That is a surprise. I thought that would be given some type of national audience. So again, I think games can get moved around, so we'll see.
No doubt.
I wonder. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to break down all the team schedules yet, but I wonder what the 425 national game is on.
Yeah, don't know. But from a storyline perspective, I mean, John, we don't have to be too smart to figure out the hype.
Oh yeah.
Of that week's game is going to be off the charts.
And especially that's week 7. Saquon does have an injury history, like we've talked about. I
Right.
hope he's on the field still then.
You
See
just
what I
don't
mean?
know. So, I mean, with all of those things in the stew, I was pretty confident Giants would be hosting the Eagles probably one time in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I really thought so.
And we will go through this sequentially, folks. Just a couple of themes we wanted to hit on first. And, you mentioned it, so let's talk about the NFC East games. Mm-hmm. Because a lot more earlier in the year than we normally get. The Giants will play 4 NFC East games by November 3rd.
Yeah.
So of their 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, first 9 games, 4 are against NFC East opponents. They have Dallas, first time ever on Thursday Night Football on September 26th. They have Philadelphia. They have Washington, September 15th in Week 2. That's in Washington. So it's in Washington, September 15th, Week 2. Week 4, home versus Dallas on Thursday Night Football. Philly, 3 weeks later, the game we just mentioned, October 20th, Sunday at 1 o'clock. And then home versus Washington, November 3rd at 1 p.m. So not only for the first 9 games against NFC East opponents, Paul, all 3 of the Giants' home games against NFC East opponents early in the year as well.
Yeah, and the flip side of that, as you can imagine, means in the second half of the schedule, there's a dearth of NFC East games. Now, I will tell you, folks, I always prefer to get more of my inside division games, intra-division games, if you will, later on in the season, because it's really painful to scoreboard watch. If you're trying to catch up and you're trying to compete and fight within your division for positioning and potentially a division title or even a wild card, you don't want to have to be scoreboard watching all the time. You'd like to be able to play your division opponents and know if we win this game, they lose. You don't have to worry about it. But after Thanksgiving, when the Giants play the Cowboys, they only have one more NFC East game, and it's the season finale against Philadelphia.
And that game, the last couple of years,
Could
hasn't
mean
even
nothing.
meant anything. So
Could mean nothing.
Only 1 out of the final 5 games against NFC East teams, which
Right.
is rare given how they usually put the schedule together.
Very rare,
Yeah.
and it puts the Giants in a situation where, and I know the coaches and the players will tell you have to take care of business on the field yourself, and you just can't worry about what other people are doing. But if you're a fan out there, I guarantee you are going to be stressed out scoreboard watching every single game with those divisional opponents or divisional rivals down the final month of the season, because you know you're not playing them and you can't take care of your own business and try to knock them off and make up ground.
Okay, any other larger themes here, Paul, you want to hit before we take this thing in sequential order?
Well, I think before we started, John, you mentioned to me the gauntlet.
Well, I want to go in order. So,
All right.
So that'll be in the middle of the order.
Okay.
Any other larger things that you want
Yeah,
to touch
you know
on?
what? You know what? I think the other one that kind of hit me a little bit, and it's there's no more than 2 consecutive road games at any time during the schedule.
That's a good one.
And folks,
And in fact, they only play back-to-back road games once in weeks 2 and 3.
right.
That's it.
And if you know anything about the way these guys prepare and their workflow schedule, I will tell you that is a very welcomed move that the Giants were able to come up with. Now, it wasn't their move, obviously. This is what the league gave them. But it's very advantageous not to have 3 road games in a row. The league does try to avoid giving you 3 road games in a row. They do try, but they're not always successful in doing so. And I think that's very good. The other item I would just throw out there, John.
And they do have back-to-back home games on 2 separate occasions, by the way. They
Yes.
play back-to-back home games October 13th, October 20th, and then back-to-back home games on December 8th and December 15th.
Yeah, the other thing that I would throw in there is that the Thursday night game against Dallas, it comes early enough in the season, and it's a familiar foe. They're coming off a short road trip against Cleveland.
No back-to-back road trips.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. That's advantageous. You hate to have a road trip involved with one of your funky day schedule games.
Now, Cleveland is a physical, good defensive football
It
team,
is.
though, so you're going to come off like a very physical game against Dallas.
But your travel and logistics won't be as bad as they could be.
And I like being familiar with the opponent. You know, it's the same
It's a
Dallas
big deal.
quarterback, same Dallas coach.
Big deal.
Both teams, frankly, are going to be familiar with their opponent in that game with the same coaching staffs and quarterback kind of in place over the last few years. So that'll make that prepreparation for that Thursday
think
game
so.
a little bit easier. I'm with you on that. The final bigger theme I'll bring up, Paul, and this kind of just bumped in my head here as I continue to review this. We haven't had this in our hands for very long before we started doing this, so I'm gonna have little revelations as we go here, which is always fun. But you have the bye on November 17th, which is week 5, 6, 7,
11.
8, 9, 10, 11. Then they get the Thanksgiving Day in week 12. So you get that mini bye. So you get your bye and then
Yeah.
the mini bye after the Thanksgiving game, only 2 weeks apart.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be very well rested heading into that final 5-game stretch of the season. And then again, you have that mini bye again at the end of September. So they have their rest breaks split up pretty well here, Paul. So they get a couple pauses here and there, which is nice. You do have the short week on Monday Night Football at the end of October at Pittsburgh Monday night. Then
Again,
they play.
not a far trip.
No, correct. And the Giants they only have one far trip on their roster in the schedule, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. And
Right.
that's on October 6th. I think we will go through this in order. And then I don't like the short week. They have 2 short weeks heading into division games. Actually, 3 short weeks heading into division games. You have Dallas Thursday.
Right.
Now, again, Dallas is a short week that week, too, so that's okay.
Yes.
You have the short week heading into the Washington game on November 3rd off of the Pittsburgh game.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the short week Thanksgiving at Dallas. So, again, Dallas has short weeks those 2 weeks, too, so it's not really an impact. But you do have 3 short weeks heading into division games. But I do like how you're having those mini breaks with the bye and the 2 Thursday games kind of spread out a little bit.
And in the 2 Dallas cases, you're home before each of those short weeks, which is good. Same thing with Pittsburgh. You're home for Philly before that short week as well. That does make a difference. When these guys are pulling into Newark Airport at all kinds of crazy hours, it does kind of throw off the body clock and the way they're going to do things on Monday morning. I thought the other item too, John, to go right, kind of filters into what you just said.
Yep.
Look at this now. The second half of the season begins with a stretch from week 9 through week 15 that includes only 2 road trips. There's the Germany trip and there's the Dallas trip, which are unique because you're talking about Germany and you're talking about Thanksgiving, which includes kind of the mini bye and the bye. So think about that, okay? From week 9 to week 15, the Giants in the beginning of the second half of their schedule, from a physicality standpoint, there's a little bit of a chance to kind of catch your breath. Little bit.
Correct. All right. Now let's go through it here, Paul. I'm going to kind of break this schedule up into groups, and I think we can kind of separate it into groups and and how it'll work. And I'll just take the first 2 weeks as one individual group here. Okay.
Okay.
So the Giants open up on September 8th. To begin their 100th season celebration against the Minnesota Vikings. And again, the Giants will have more details in terms of what they're going to celebrate each week and everything as we move into the summer. There will be celebrations. We don't know what games for what yet, but we'll announce that as we go. They'll start the season against Minnesota on Sunday, September 8th at 1 o'clock. Then at Washington, September 15th, 1 p.m. 2 notes on these 2 games. 1, 2 potential rookie starting quarterbacks in
Yep.
J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
Number 2, you want to talk about storylines. If you don't think week 1 they're locked and loaded, the Giants passed on J.J. McCarthy in the draft, and they're playing him in week 1,
Potentially.
just please win that game. I don't want to deal with
Potentially.
that. Please. So 2 rookie quarterbacks those first 2 weeks, 2 teams that were not playoff teams last year. So we talk about the importance of getting off to a fast start. At least the first 2 games should be games with the Giants. If they're not favored, it should at least be a game where you're playing an opponent, I think, in the same tier as you, where you should have a good chance of walking away with a victory.
Well, let me add this to you too, John. We talked the other day on BBKL about you don't want to face a ferocious pass rush coming out of the gate. Minnesota's pass rush is being totally rebuilt this year.
Yeah, they just lost Danielle Hunter, correct.
For starters, yeah. And one of them is also gone too. So they've lost their 2 top pass rushers from last year. They're totally rebuilding their pass rush. Washington, we already know what they did middle of last season when they started trading guys off. So you're looking at 2 defenses that are literally rebuilding their pass rush. Now, look, I'm not going to be so ridiculous as to assume that the Giants' offensive line will come out of the gate strong. But let's just say I feel a little better about their ability to start the season when they're facing less than shark teeth coming out of the box. How about that?
We'll also get to see Dallas Turner week 1, their other rookie first-round pick. A lot of people thought he was the best pass rusher in the draft, so we'll get to see him. And then we kind of talked about this on Big Blue Kickoff Live as well, Paul. You know, Jaden Daniels in week 1, you would have 0 film on them in the regular season. At least you're going to have one game to look at from whoever Washington plays in week 1. Again, I haven't looked at it. But you'll at least get 1 week worth of tape of Jaden Daniels when you watch him take on whoever they do in week 1, so you're a little bit more prepared for week number 2 at Washington.
I would concur with that as well.
That could be Washington's home opener too, by the way, which is an important thing. That's always a tough game.
Yeah, we don't know that at the moment while we're doing this. But, you know, to be frank, again, we know how important it is for this Giants team to get off to a good start in September.
Yeah.
And I think these first 2 games, without being predictive about how those games will go and what those scores are, I think that there are some pedestrian aspects to these 2 opponents that are at least palatable for the Giants. Will you agree?
I will say that it'll be early big-time tests for the Giants secondary, even though they have rookie quarterbacks. 2 very good pairs of wide receivers.
Receiving cores are really good.
Jordan Jefferson.
Really good.
Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison.
Yes.
I combine those 2 guys. Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson.
No question.
And all those guys in Washington. So that'll be a nice little test for a revamped Giants secondary to see how they do against 2 good receivers.
Yeah, the passing weaponry is there. What we just don't know is what those quarterbacks are going to be.
Right.
And then again, as I say, on the other side of the ball, I like the fact that those are going to be reconstituted pass rushes as opposed to coming in going up against a King Kong pass rush.
All right. Well, here comes Godzilla for the next 5 games.
Okay.
This is the gauntlet. And, you know, the Giants had some really tough opponents on the schedule. Well, here's the gauntlet, folks. We mentioned September 22nd, week 3 at Cleveland. Cleveland's a very good football team.
They sure are.
If Deshaun Watson can play a little bit better, other than the quarterback, Cleveland is one of the most talented teams in the league. That's how good they are. They can rush the passer. They have a good offensive line. They're good weapons. Amari Cooper, go down the list. Nick Chubb, if he's back by then. You know, we got to see with his injury whether he's healthy by week 3.
Right.
But really good football team. We talked about Dallas on that Thursday game. Then at Seattle, luckily you have a little bit of extra time before you travel to Seattle coming off that Thursday game, so maybe that'll take some of the juice out of the travel.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're home versus Cincinnati, home versus Philadelphia, at Pittsburgh. Those are all playoff. No, Seattle just missed it, right? Last year?
Right.
So, and the Bengals made it, right? The Bengals made it last year.
Yep.
So every single one of those, and Pittsburgh just missed it, or did they end up making it last year?
They made it.
They made it. So all those teams except for one are playoff teams from last year, and Seattle was a 9-win team. So it's very tough games.
Weeks 3 to 8
Yep.
is what you're talking about. That to me is the toughest part of the schedule, and it just so happens that finishes out the first half of the schedule for the Giants. I will say this, at least the Seattle game is week 5. Remember, Pete Carroll is no longer coaching that team. They've undergone a coaching change there, and so it will be at least good for the Giants coaching staff to have a month of film to know what the Seahawks are going to do. I mean, I always talk about this, John, and we've discussed it on the show so many times. First week or 2 of the season, you're going up against a new coaching staff. You really are in the dark. You do as much homework as you can, but there's going to be a certain amount of mystery. Well, Seattle,
remember they brought in the Washington Huskies offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
That's their new OC there.
So we're going to have to see, by the time the Giants play them, we will have seen some semblance of what the Seahawks want to be.
Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day to everyday, Citizens is made ready for Giant fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. All right, so that's the gauntlet, Paul. We talked about Dallas. We're very familiar with them. We don't have to do a full breakdown of every single opponent.
No.
As we move ahead. We don't need to do that. But Pittsburgh, very physical team, offensive line of Joe Burrow's health. We know how good the Bengals are. So those are all very, very good teams. Then you hit a little bit of an area. You're like, all right, we can regroup. You're playing Washington, who had the second overall pick in last year's draft. That's a home game. You go to Germany to play Carolina. They had the top overall pick in the draft last year. So 2 teams with records that were poor last season. Again, we don't know what they're going to be next year. I think both teams will be better, but we'll see. Bye week, and then Tampa Bay, who didn't make the playoffs. The Tampa's a solid team. Like that is going to be a very tough game before that Thanksgiving game at Dallas.
I think the interesting part at this section of the schedule for me, John, outside of the Germany game at Munich, take a look at this travel now. You're home for Cincinnati, home for Philly at the end of the gauntlet. You're going to Pittsburgh, short trip, home for Washington. Now you have the big trip to Germany. Then you get the bye, and you're home against Tampa Bay.
Right.
So
then the short week at Dallas.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got a 7-week stretch here from Cincinnati to Tampa, where once again, road trip to Pittsburgh, which is virtually nothing. That's easy to work around. And you got the Germany trip, but you're getting a bye after that. So the travel and the logistics, we knew going in because of their road opponents, wasn't going to be very difficult. But I do like the way it's been laid out.
All right, and now let's go to our final stretch of games here, Paul. We mentioned this previously. After that Thanksgiving game at Dallas, starting on December 8th, home versus the Saints at 1 p.m. December 15th, home versus the Ravens at 1 p.m. December 22nd, at Atlanta, 1 p.m. Then Colts at home and at Philadelphia. So you get the Saints in Atlanta, and Tampa, frankly, 2 games before that. You get a lot of NFC South late in the year here, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel pretty strongly that division's going to be up for grabs in the final month of the year. I think all those teams could be tightly wound in that group. Maybe Carolina's a little bit behind, but I could see any one of those other 3 teams making a run for that division. So those teams are going to be fighting in there trying to win a division title with those 3 games. And those are games the Giants will need to win if they want to make the playoffs. So I think those would be some really fun contests.
Yeah, I would expect as much too. Now, I think the part to this part of the schedule that you notice right away, obviously the season finale is in Philadelphia, which has, for the most part, been a very difficult place for the Giants to play for the last decade.
And that's been a pretty consistent final game of the year the last few years. They've been doing that a lot.
So it is what it is. But I noticed, and it wasn't like the Giants had a bunch of warm climates on their road schedule, but when you look at it, they're in the Dome at Atlanta in the 3rd to last week of the regular season. And then their previous road game before that is Dallas on Thanksgiving. So
also a dome.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the German stadium a dome? Or is that outdoors?
I believe there's a hole in the roof.
It's like Dallas.
Yeah,
same type
that's what I think.
You. Okay.
I don't think they close it.
I do not have details on the German stadium. Sorry.
No, we do not. But those are your road games. Besides Philly, you've got Dallas, which could potentially have a closed roof, and you've got Atlanta, which will have a closed roof. So, weather should not necessarily be impactful as this team goes on the road down the stretch. But obviously the home games here in East Rutherford, you're playing the Saints, the Ravens, and Indy in the final stretch of the season. If we have nasty weather in New Jersey, well, so be it. I mean, that's just the way it's going to have to be. I don't think New Orleans would like really nasty weather, and I don't think the Colts would like to face really nasty weather if the Giants are looking for some kind of home field advantage due to the climate. So Baltimore, I don't think they care.
No, I don't think they do. So I'll close with this, Paul, and then you can give your final comments. I just think critical, if you can figure out a way to win those first 2 games, to be 2-0 before you hit that gauntlet, that to me is going to be very important because you're going to lose some games in that week 3 to week 8 range when you're playing all those teams that made the playoffs last year. If all the quarterbacks are healthy, we've talked about that already. But I think very important to figure out a way to beat Minnesota week 1, beat Washington in week 2, 2 rookie quarterbacks, and have build a little cushion for yourself heading into that stretch again where you're playing a lot of playoff teams and all teams that finished over 500 last year at Cleveland, home versus Dallas, at Seattle, Cincy, Philly, at Pittsburgh.
I wonder how much Shane Bowen is going to be able to bring with him in his notebook about the Cleveland Browns in week 3. I don't know.
I mean, AFC South, AFC North.
I don't know how often they've played in the time he was in Tennessee. I don't know that.
And by the way, I would say don't sleep on the Colts, by the way. I think the Colts have a chance to be a pretty good team this year. If Anthony Richardson stays healthy and he plays well.
They are a dome team, though.
Correct.
And again, I've always said if you can get home field weather advantage.
Well, but that's correct. Right.
And that game's here.
Correct.
And so is the Saints game.
Yeah.
With about a month left in the season, the Saints have to come up here, and I'm sure that they don't want to see freezing rain or nasty wind either.
Final thoughts.
Well, again, I think for the most part, if you were to weigh out the logistical and competitive aspects of this schedule, I think it weighs a little more positively in the Giants' favor than I thought it was going to.
This is one of my – I like this schedule more than the last few, where you kind of just got all these really tough games at the beginning of the year, and it was hard to survive them. I feel like this is – that 3 to 8 period is rough, but at least you're starting the season with two teams that did not make the playoffs last year.
Yeah, the one thing that kind of really does stick as the thorn in my side is the fact that there's so few NFC East games in the stretch run. Again, I'm not one who enjoys scoreboard watching and wanting to find out what's going on in other buildings as you're in the final playoff push. I kind of like to take care of business myself within the division. That's the one thorn that probably bothers me more than anything.
Yeah, and we already knew this going in, but really only 7 true road games, right? Munich's technically a road game, but there's going to be more Giant fans there than Panthers fans. Let's be honest for
I
a
would
second.
think so.
So that's going to be a virtual home games. You almost have 10 home games and 7 road games, which will help as well. And we know, Giant fans will show up well in places like Atlanta, where Giant fans have generally had a pretty good showing. Paul, this was fun, my friend.
Sure was.
All right, everybody, don't forget the Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens, Giants level winner. That's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 Best Bank in the U.S. by who else? The Banker. As the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle, Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. That's your 2024 Giants schedule. For Paul Dottino, I'm John Schmuck. We'll see you next time, everybody.
For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Friday, May 17th, the world's most exciting combat sport, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, is back at Liberty First Credit Union Arena. In the main event, a man tearing through the competition, Carlos Trinidad Snake, fights a warrior who hasn't tasted defeat since 2021, Dustin the Disciple Paig. In the co-main event, Dakota Cochran fights Jamie Hittem Holloway. It's Bare Knuckle Fighting, no gloves allowed. Don't miss out on this adrenaline-fueled event. Get your tickets now at bkfc.com.